Welcome to Spacious Creative. I am Cindy Ingram.
And I am Heather Doyle Fraser. And in this podcast, we're exploring the process and practice of creativity, but with the foundation in compassion.
In this limited series, we'll dive into how creative expression shows up in our lives, from childhood inspirations to the challenges of perfectionism and everything in between.
Whether you're reconnecting with your inner child or reimagining your creative identity and how you can harness more creativity in your life, Spacious Creative is here to inspire and support your journey.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Spacious Creative. Hi, Heather.
Hello, Cindy.
We are here for our 8th episode, which is technically the last episode of our first season of Spacious Creative, if we want to call it that. But we both know that this is not the end of the podcast because we already have more ideas on what we can do next. But this will be the last of
Hard to narrow it down, honestly.
I know. should probably the last of our weekly episodes, mainly because I'm about to go on a trip and I know we won't have one the following week. So I want to start with a little story that has something that happened to me last week that I thought was intimately tied to creativity. But I did neuropsychological testing last week, or I spent an entire day doing assessments for autism and ADHD. And the very last thing they had me do, and I knew it was coming because my children had been there, my husband had been there, like they had all been tested by the same place. And so like I knew they were going to do it. And first they made me draw a self-portrait. So actually 2 of my family members had to draw a picture of their family. And then me and my daughter Lily had to draw a self-portrait. So I drew a self-portrait. And they gave me the markers that were like running low. It was terrible. But anyway, I drew a self-portrait, it was fine. And then they asked me to write a story about my self-portrait. And I like to tell them a story. And I like completely crawled out of my skin. Like I was like not ready for that, even though I knew it's somewhere in my head, I knew that there was going to be a storytelling component to it, but I had no idea what to do. I was like, it's just a self-portrait. If I knew I was going to write a story, I would have drawn myself doing something. So then I'd have information, so I was like all in my head and I was really uncomfortable. And that was the last thing. And so I tell this, I don't even know what I did, but I was so uncomfortable having to do to tell another person a story in that moment. But then later that day, or like maybe it was the next day, we were looking at pictures and videos of my older daughter when she was little. We were looking for a specific photo, but every time we go looking for a specific photo, we end up like watching every video we could ever find. Mm-hmm. And there were all these videos of her just singing and telling stories. And like, it was just like overflowing out of her body into the camera. Like, and she didn't think twice about anything that she said. And these videos it was before my other daughter was born. So she was like three or 4 probably when she was, and I'm like, well, how did I get to a place where I can't even, I couldn't even, the idea of telling a story about myself as a self-portrait was so uncomfortable when like, it's a natural way for like little people to just play and be free and like not care. And it was.
And also amazing. You wrote a whole book on basically a self-portrait of yourself.
I did. It was probably the someone staring at me while I have to create it component.
Like in that moment, didn't feel safe. Hello. Like,
that's what it was. Oh yeah. I basically, as my story summed up my book, I was like, once there was a girl who was feeling anxious and shame, and then she, it was so stupid. And I left, I had like an hour drive and I was like shaking my body. I was like, get all of this feeling out of me. I was so uncomfortable. But
if it was me, I would have also had that really anxious sweat,
yeah.
The time it smells really bad and like it gets really sticky and you're like, oh God, I need a shower right now.
I was like, don't make me do it. Don't make me be creative on demand like that. But I tie it back to this idea though, that like if I were to ask my daughter at age 4 to tell me a story, easy, you know. Well, in one of the videos, she was singing a story. She was like, first you go here, and then you go back home, and then you like go to bed, and she like laid on the floor. She was like, and then we go back home, and then, you know, it's just like this whole thing, like, but she was singing the whole story and acting it out as she goes, and it was just like no thought whatsoever, and just allowing it to happen. And adults, we've lost, a lot of adults have lost that sort of sense of
Well,
spontaneity and play.
and I think also because when you're a child and you're in, like for, especially for your daughter, when you were watching that video, she probably was someplace where she felt safe. She felt like this is what like I do every day. I'm really practiced at this. And we don't do that as adults. We don't engage with that place very often. And that's why we talk about needing to feel safe to do that, because
Yeah,
when you don't, you have a like fight flight response to it.
yeah,
And it's really hard to create when you're in that threat place. But when it's play and not like like I'm being graded on this, or it's a performance, or it's a, like it's something that is going to be used to like to do something else. It's
yeah,
not for itself. It's not for itself. Then it loses the play component, and we kind of lose the thread with it a little bit too.
yeah, yeah. It's when I think of now, like just when I think of the idea of play, like if there's a feeling that comes up in my body, and I can't quite name it, but it's like it's like a fear. It's like a fear. There's like this feeling of inadequacy, like I'm not going to be able to do that. There's a feeling of why
Mhm.
why am I going to play? There's a feeling of like what even is play? Like I like
Is this productive? Will this be
yes,
productive?
there's so like there's all these things that I'm like, oh, because even when my kids were little and I would play with them, like it I found that to be terribly hard when we were like playing with little figures. I'm just like, I don't know what to do here. I'm doing it wrong. Like it just feels like vulnerable and scary to like
Yeah, it
to
is
play.
when we're adults, not when we're
Yeah.
kids, but
Right.
when we're adults, because that's been kind of tamped out of us, honestly, that, like, what are you doing? What, like, aren't you gotta, monetize that. You have to make sure it's for a purpose that is, going to like save you time. Let's multitask it all, like all the
Yeah.
things. Like we get caught in that as adults. And some of those things are helpful in terms of like, yeah, we do get things done that need to get done as adults. And, you know, that is important. And when you completely lose all of that, that's not great.
Yeah.
In fact, it's really bad.
But when I
I
think about like artists, writers, dancers, and like what happens at the beginning of a process of creating something.
Mhm.
And even myself, when I'm like starting to work on like a, you know, collage or an art journal page or whatever, like it starts with a period of experimentation, and it starts
Yeah,
with the period of like curiosity and like
like exploring, not
yeah,
doing it for an outcome. Like, let's just see what happens if. What about if I did this? Or like I feel like it's all about that like exploring place. And often in our daily lives, we don't give space for exploration. We need to know like this is going to equal 1 + 1 = 2. That's what I need to do. And we don't have space for like, but what if we did this? What would that look like?
yeah, and that's what really play is, I think. Probably, I don't know what the definition of play, but now I tend to do it as like, you know, playing a video game, but that's not the same thing. There's just this unstructured.
Yeah, I feel like the type of play we are discussing is definitely unstructured, built on exploration and curiosity and engaged in without a specific outcome in mind, maybe, at least when you start it, like
Yeah.
as you engage more with a specific thing that you're working, like maybe if it's a piece of writing or it's a, piece of art or something else, or, you might have expectations around that the further you get into it. But when you start, it's like unattachment from like outcome really and just being in that moment. And I think when you are in that place, you engage with awe, you engage with possibility, you engage with time in a different way because you are so in in flow with whatever that is that you're experiencing, that time doesn't really exist for you almost.
Hmm.
Um, and that's what we see in kids when they're playing. And I think that we just don't give ourselves that opportunity as adults. And everybody looks at different things as, I mean, like for me, sometimes rearranging, I've talked about this before, but literally rearranging the furniture is a form of play for me. And
Yeah.
I I don't know how it's going to work out a lot of times. And I can see my husband looking at me like, what is, because what happens first is I just start walking around the house. What can I move from a different room to this room to and change things up and like pacing things off. Will this fit? And I don't use a measuring tape. No, I think my feet are better. So I just, walk it off. But even something like that feels like play to me. There are certain music things that feel like play to me, not all things, because I also do that as, a job, and certain writing things that feel like play at the beginning to me, but they don't feel like play later on. So there's like a kind of a push and pull with that for me, I think, and probably most people who engage in creative projects, but it always starts out with that like curiosity, you know, questioning, exploration, those types of things, and definitely not knowing for certain what's going to happen.
Yeah. And what I have kind of two strains of thought that are related, but not about this, is that one, this sort of like, as you're talking about it, I'm sort of imagining like a bubble around you. Like there's just this space of, this is my play space and my play, like it's a time and space bubble encapsulated.
Mhm.
And like how often we as people do not see value in giving ourselves that time and space to to play, to be creative. Like we'll like we'll watch, 4 episodes of Bridgerton in a row on like one night, and then but then like not use that same time to like be creative. And it's so interesting to me that like I feel like I can't get my words in the right order about
No,
this, but it's something about valuing.
yes, I feel what you're saying in my body, even if, like I
Yeah.
can feel that. And I was just, also thinking like reading for me is play. I mean, like
Yeah.
there's certain reading for me that's play. There's certain reading for me that's work, and there's certain reading for me that's play. And but it's interesting because I have specific spaces in my house that I have for my play reading versus my work reading.
Mm.
Like even that, I mean, and I think because with those, I engage with my play books. That's in air quotes. You can't see that, but that's what's happening. I engage with those that are usually going to be fiction or poetry or short story or something like that versus a nonfiction read. Although sometimes nonfiction goes into the play reading, but not as frequently. I would, memoir is a kind of straddling both of those things for me. But when I am engaged with that, I'm playing with the book. I mean, in a way that you don't do when you watch a show. Like I'm engaging with those characters in a totally different way in my brain anyway, and in my body. I just have a feeling of that, but I create a physical space for me to do that too. Like I have a little like nook in my bedroom. I sometimes read in my bed before I go to bed, but I also have a chair in my bedroom that sits next to a small bookcase and has a really light that comes over top, and it's just like perfectly fits my body. It's not too big, it's not too small. It's the Goldilocks thing. It's just right. I have a candle there. I have a place to put my tea if I want to. I mean, like it's all set up so that I feel cozy, safe, and ready to just have that time for me and nothing else. And I spend a lot of time doing that.
Yeah. The I've been reading a little bit more like that lately. I noticed last year, I read 52 books last year in 2023,
Mhm,
and I was really proud of that. It was the highest
mhm,
number of books I ever read.
mhm.
And then this year, I spent the first 6 months of the year like not being able to read at all, like very little. Or I and but I would be reading like 5 or 6 books at once. And like I have some that I just pick up every now and then. I'll just read a little bit of it and like and I think this whole like culture we live in, this like productivity that you have to be achieving something and you have to be working towards something, and it has to have it's outcome based. Like my Goodreads number of books is not going up, but I am still reading. So I feel like I'm not accomplishing anything. And at the same time is like I feel like the time that I spent reading wasn't worth it because I haven't yet finished that book. And I'm like,
Completed.
there
Yeah.
is so much like baggage around like completing, like
Mhm.
and finishing a product and
Rather than experiencing it
rather
just.
than the actual experience. Yeah.
And that's how I
Um,
read books too, in terms of uh I have a number of books that are going at once. And depending on how I feel and who I want to play with that day or that
yeah.
night, that's what I read. So it could be poetry, it could be, and it could be like a contemporary fiction, it can be historical fiction, it could be, whatever, a memoir, it could be short stories, but I have a lot of books going at once. And I didn't used to do that. I used to do like one at a time. Here we go.
Yeah.
And I think I gave myself permission at some point in the past, I don't know. I'm gonna say the past 8-ish years, something like that, 6 to 8 years, something shifted where I just realized I need different things at different times.
Yeah.
I need different, I need different, avenues to play in at different times. And all these books provide that place for me, that safe place. And so then I still make a list of all the books that I'm reading. And I do write down when I complete them just to see, like, that one took me a long time. But but I'm less, I'm not I am no longer reading for someone else's like approval or anything, like
Yeah.
it's like this is how I like to engage. And I think that, I mean, like obviously that mirrors a little bit my work life in that I am working with multiple clients who are writing books. So I'm reading all of those books too at once, or the beginnings of those books anyway, those first drafts and later on revisions, etc. So I'm practiced at that now. What I think is the more important piece of that is that I'm allowing myself to do and be how it feels best to me, even if it doesn't look to the outside like I'm getting any books done I mean, then all of a sudden I'll have 10 books done.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It's fascinating to be in that space of like, oh, I haven't been able to read and for a long time. And I'm like, wait, but no, I have been reading.
yes. Yeah.
And so, but I think that that, I did a bunch of interviews a few weeks ago with people about their creativity. And one of the most common thing that came up, with so many people was in investing in my creativity, creating space for my creativity, allowing myself to have that isn't tied to an end result. It isn't tied to money being made. It isn't tied to like my family getting fed. So it just goes lower and lower
How can
on
I
the priority
justify
list.
that? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't monetize it, so it's not worth doing. And well, you can't, I mean, there's always ways to monetize it, but that just adds a whole different thing that is not what we're talking about. But as what it is like creating the space for creativity is creating a space for your like own well-being and your
Yeah.
own
Yes.
sense of peace and contentment in your life outside of like the capitalist productivity machine.
Mhm. Yeah, I saw a quote that like reading an hour a day reduces your stress level by 30% or something like that. Or maybe it was 10 minutes a day reduces it by, I don't know, 10% or something. I don't know. It was something like that. And I was like, I should be completely stress-free. But I do but I do notice when I don't make time for my creative practices, and reading is just one of them, but when I don't make time for that, I notice a difference in my nervous system regulation, how I operate generally in the world, and how I can navigate difficult things that obviously always come up in our adult life. I mean, that's just how it is. So, and I think that there's been, research on creativity in general around that too. I know that Stephen Porges talks about that in his book, Our Polyvagal World, in terms of he talks about music, he talks about different art modalities. Those things do help to regulate your nervous system, especially if you are doing it in an environment where you feel safe enough to like fully engage with it. Not like the environment that you were recently in, Cindy, where you
Yeah.
didn't feel safe.
I felt
But
safe up until that moment though. Like it was
right.
a cozy chair, it was all the things, but then it's like, ah. Yeah, but it's fascinating. I have a friend that's a therapist, and she herself has been exploring the concept of creativity and writing, both writing and art, and looking at art in her life over the last year or two. And she's told me, she was like, the more and more she's noticing as she's working with her clients that like almost every single one of them, she's like noticing that like if they're like their like thirst for creativity, and
Yeah.
like she's noticing that like the need in just about every person is there, and like what that would bring to their lives, their mental health, their everything.
I think that hits on what we talked about in our last episode when people say, like, I'm not creative, or,
Yeah,
like we are creative as humans, and a lot of people just deny that for themselves. They just deny it. And then,
yeah,
so when you deny something for so long, it is like a thirst and a hunger that you cannot quench and you cannot satiate,
yeah,
because it's just dripped so infrequently to you. And I think that obviously the more you give to that, you know, versus deny that, you will experience benefits from that maybe aren't quantifiable, but you can feel them in your life.
yeah. It's like I try to think about what is how is creativity helping me in my life, and I'm like, I don't know that I could fully answer that question, like, because I think it impacts every single
I was just going to say creativity
thing.
is my life. What the heck?
Yeah,
Yeah. Like, what? I don't understand. How could you have a life without it? That's where I'm at this point.
yeah,
But I wasn't always there. I mean, I was not always in that space.
yeah. So it's just and I know I've probably said this before, but like what I was, I struggle with anxiety, and sometimes it's, most of the time now it's pretty well controlled. It's like most of the time it's just like overwhelm that gets me. But like when I am in periods of where my anxiety is higher, I've noticed that I can, if I sit down at my art desk and I just start making something, like, and playing with the materials and whatever it is, like the anxiety goes away. Like it might come back when I'm done, but like for that moment, it's just, I'm not thinking about the future. I'm not worrying about the future. I'm not worrying about the past. I'm not worrying about what anybody said. Like I'm fully like engaged in all my senses. I like my moving my hand, it's like it allows me to just be with myself in that moment.
And even if that anxiety comes back, which of course it does, like
Yeah.
it will. Yeah, but having that experience gives you a greater sense of internal safeness that helps you to navigate that too.
Yeah.
Know that you have this to go back to help navigate that more. Like it's not, and it's not an avoidance or a distraction. It's something to help with like navigating it.
And I think that's the difference that I was trying to articulate when I was like watching the Bridgerton or making the art. Like that's the difference, is that when you're engaged in your creativity, there is a part of you during that moment that is processing
Yes.
your emotions and your life and like what you're going through, and you're kind of working through it. Whereas, scrolling on your phone or binge watching a TV show, like that's distracting you and completely distracting you from. And I think reading is the same, is not like that either, because like when you're reading, like it's a slower thing, and like you're putting yourself into it, and like that's a processing
Well,
thing too.
and there's also like that place of, I do this very frequently. I will pause when I like, especially after something, I'm like, oh my God, that is totally it. And then I think about all the things in my life that
Yeah.
exemplifies, or then, I reread that passage and then I write something about it. Or I mean, like I'm engaging with it in a different way than when I'm watching something like a movie or a show. Like I will think about those things afterwards, yes, but I'm not in the moment pausing and being like, whoa, hold the phone. This has changed this sentence right here. Oh my gosh. It just changed my life. I don't even know how to explain that, but I'm going to try right now. I'm going to write down something. I'm going to underline it. I'm going to
Yeah.
highlight it. I'm going, because I am using a physical book when I'm in my play books. I'm not using an electronic book. That's just me. But like, I'm going to do all the things with this, and I'm not just passively sitting, taking in information. I'm engaging with it.
Yeah.
Um,
But I noticed too recently, it's kind of like your subconscious and your conscious mind are like working together in those
yes,
moments too.
yes,
But
yeah.
like my art table, I have big, I have a roll of paper and I put it on top of my desk to kind of, catch the paint and whatever. And then like it's littered with like little notes of, and I've been posting those on social lately. My handwriting is terrible, but it's just like just little like insights about myself, or like what I'm thinking about, and I'll just jot it down real fast. And I was going through these kind of, I called them under papers, but I was going through them all, and I'm like, there's a lot of really interesting stuff on here, so that's why I started posting on social. But it's like, while I'm, or I'll be like, because I don't, when I make an art or collage, like I don't ever start with like what I want it to be in the end, because that completely stymies me. But it somehow always ends up being like about what I had been thinking about in the end. And like it just kind of magically happens that way. So I love, like, it feels like therapy in a way. And it feels like,
It is. It's
yeah,
self-development for sure. It's engaging
yeah,
with that. I mean, sometimes when I'm, and I'm just using the mode of writing because I do that so frequently, and I do
yeah,
other types of art stuff too, but I'm most comfortable with writing. But like sometimes I'll be writing a piece and, most of the time I know where it's going, but then sometimes I don't. And I come up with something, I'm like, oh my gosh, this whole thing was about boundaries. Who knew? I thought wow, thank you. Me? I don't know.
yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the people out there
That's
that
that
are,
aspect of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh,
Go
good. No,
ahead.
you go ahead. I was diverting.
I was going to say that's part of the play piece too, like being willing to let things happen that you don't know what will happen. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, with writing, there's things that you need to know what are going to happen, but then you also need to be able to hold it lightly enough to be like, if this changes, I'm okay with it, but this is the direction I'm going.
Yeah.
But that's where like all that serendipity happens. It's when you like open yourself up to the possibility and you learn so much about yourself. Like, wow, that I didn't even know that was in there. I guess I did, but I didn't give it the airtime ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something that you said I was gonna, sorry. I lost a thought completely again, and that's fine. That's what my brain does. It'll come back. But it makes me think about like all the people that are not doing like processing their lives and their emotions and in some sort of creative way. Like all of that, all of those thoughts, feelings, emotions are there, but they're
Mhm.
just being trapped in your body, you know?
And, you know, we're not taught how to do that. We're not given examples of how to do that. We're not given permission to do that, really, in our adult lives.
No, I mean,
It's
we're taught that it's not safe to show our feelings and to like let all of that out. Like that you're going to be judged, you're going to be shunned, you're going to be left out of your, you're going to lose your sense of livelihood. You need to like keep all of that inside. And so the idea of just like not being able to know what's going to come out,
Mhm.
that's really scary
Yeah,
to think
it's
about.
scary. It feels completely like uh not a workable thing to do.
Yeah.
If you haven't experienced, I mean, if you haven't like done any practice with that. And that's why we need to create spaces for that, that are safe, that allow you to play, that allow you to explore, that allow you to observe and reflect and think about things without like attachment to the outcome.
Yeah. I think that that's so like because one of the I think main things for me that helped me really live this was participating in your writing practice group, because it was like every day I would have a community of people that were also doing the same thing that I was doing, and we would talk through what we were doing before and after. We were getting coaching from you, it was like really helpful to, and it was a contained time and space. Like it was okay, this hour I'm going to allow myself to let whatever fears are there to just be, and I'm going to just do this work. And that space really helped uh, me learn how to do this. It's just like that daily, that's why you call it the writing practice, but it's that daily practice. And that's why we call our program Spacious Creative Process, wait, compassionate
Compassionate
process.
process and practice. Yeah.
I'm like, I get it right usually when but it's got that space in there because we were creating the space for it, but it's got that like that practice at it, because it's not like you're just going to suddenly sit down to your art table if you have never made art in forever and be like, oh, I know exactly how to play here. But it is really like vulnerable and it's kind of scary at the beginning.
And that's why the process thing is important too, because there's we all have processes that work for us in other areas, and creativity is the same. We just don't know it because we haven't been doing it or
Yeah.
have even if we have done it in the past, we haven't, you know, given ourselves the time and opportunity to explore it more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, our program, if you're interested in joining us, will give you the space and the time to find your process and create your practice so that this can be a part of your and play. Yeah. One of our weeks is called play of our themes. So, and that will be fun. We'll play in a very safe and fulfilling way that won't be too scary, but maybe a little bit scary.
Well, probably like we talked about before, being in like your comfort creative zone is not without discomfort. It just means you have enough feeling of safeness internally to be able to engage with it. Mm-hmm. So it's not without discomfort. It's just you have enough safeness feeling inside that you can deal with it.
Yeah. And that discomfort is not going to keep you from doing it altogether. Because right now, if you're listening and you have not engaged in your creativity, that discomfort is that bigger circle. I'm like, there's these 3 circles that we've talked about on the podcast before, but like that's a big one because it's blocking out everything else. Is not allowing you to really consider the possibility of what's there for you. So we'll shrink that a little bit by adding in the safety and the
soothing.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, join our program. It's great.
It's gonna be awesome.
It's gonna be so good. It's gonna be so good. The spaciouscreative.com. Yeah. It's just like allowing yourself to giving like what you said, you gave yourself permission to just read books however you wanted to do them. Like, joining this program is you giving yourself permission to like fully start that relationship with your creativity and not knowing what's going to happen at the end, but knowing that, trusting that whatever will happen is going to be the right and beautiful thing that will happen. Like nothing bad can happen from engaging with your creativity. You might feel some emotions that you weren't expecting to feel, but
and that's good. Why we have this space together that is, we're not sending you off by yourself to deal with those things. And, like we're there with you, supporting you. As things come up.
Yeah. And that was just so key for me writing my book. And as just in the creative process in general, just having that support, it's really important. So yeah. Anything else you want to say on this topic?
I feel like we have touched on a lot of things. I was thinking back to my book reading example, and I realized even as I was talking, like, yes, I think I started doing the like allowing myself to read more books at once, maybe 6-ish years ago, but I didn't embrace that as like, this is how I like read books now.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's always like a place of learning happening, a place of process happening, like a place of like, oh, I've incorporated so many different things into my life and the way that compassion helps me to deal with these things. And then there's another piece. And so there, like, even no matter where you are on your journey, I think that there's always space to deepen that like experience around creativity and compassion and that play and, like exploration, even if, like you have in the past said, well, I've done that before and it worked, but for right now, and for some reason right now, I'm feeling a little bit of a slump, but I can, and we talked about that in a previous episode, but I can come back to this. Yes, you can. And this is a good way to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like we've said, I know I've mentioned it in almost every episode because there's always that one point in the episode I'm like, oh yeah, that's what this is. But you're relationship with your creativity is a relationship with yourself. And like, it is like a modality to better understand who you are in this world. And like the depths of that are unending. I mean, cause the same thing, I was like, I only, while talking to you, realized that I have been reading all year. I was like, I've been judging myself for like, God, you haven't been reading. And I'm like, wait a minute, I have been reading. It's just, and like, I did not even notice, but like the depths within you are massive and wanting to be explored, and creativity is an amazing way to do that.
Mm-hmm. And we're here to help you with it.
Yeah. We're real passionate about it, as you can tell. We'll talk about this all day, and that's probably why this won't be the last of our Spacious Creative podcast episodes, but this is the last one before the program starts. So if you want to get in on this and talk with us about creativity and really play with us in the Spacious Creative, we would love to have you at thespaciouscreative.com. Yeah, feel free to reach out and ask us any questions if you have any questions about the program before it starts as well. I think that's all for today.
Yay.
All righty. Well, y'all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you next time we come back and record more episodes.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Spacious Creative. We hope you found inspiration and insights to give you some momentum on your creative journey.
If you're ready to dive deeper, we invite you to register for our 6-week program, The Spacious Creative, Compassionate Practice and Process, starting in September. Sign up at thespaciouscreative.com. We can't wait to connect with you again on our next episode. Until then, trust your creativity and hold your inspiration and yourself with compassion.